Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. I am so happy that you're here. Now, you may be hearing about the potential for big global events impacting specific countries, impacting the entire world. There's a lot of talk about global astrological events happening right now, and that's going to continue into 2025 and 2026. So, what we wanted to do was create an episode for you here on the podcast where you can learn about how astrologers are looking at charts for the world or for countries. It's called Mundane astrology. It's a really unfortunate name as far as I'm concerned, because it just doesn't sound that interesting, but it actually is very, very interesting. And so I have a very special guest with us here today to talk about mundane astrology, what it is, where to get started, what planets are the big players in the interpretations of world or country charts, and how you can actually start to look at what astrologers are looking at when they are talking about global events, and perhaps even come to your own conclusions about what you think is coming up for us all in near future events. Today, we have with us a very dear guest, Stormie Grace, who has been a part of the Astrology Hub platform for many, many years. We haven't featured her on the podcast for a little while, so I'm really happy that Stormie's back. And she's going to be in the inner circle again this year, next year in 2025, which is also very exciting. Stormie is a practicing astrologer and YouTuber. She holds a doctorate of business, which enables her to apply the skills of business and mundane astrology, as well as personal chart work. She's a board member of OPA, a member of AFAN, ESAR, and NCGR, a contributor to Career Astrologer, of course, astrologyhub.com, and Midheaven Magazine. And she's also a faculty member for this Portland School of Astrology. I don't know if that's true anymore, Stormie, since I know that you've made a big international move over to Spain, which I would just love to start there, because I know that there's an astrological story here with your recent move to Spain. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And also welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks. It's so good to be back. I love being here. This is the best tribe to be in for sure. And yes, I can tell you about it. And astrologically, it's absolutely been brilliant to watch it play out. So for me, what it looked like is it was nodal first. And when the nodes got into Taurus and Scorpio 20 years ago, I had wanted to go. Previously, I had wanted to live in Europe. I thought I would live in Europe. My grandparents are German. I just always kind of assumed I would be there. That's the pace of life I wanted, and to study languages. I'm a polyglot, so it was very important to me to be here. And life was lifing, and I stayed in the United States, had my children, did education, did all of those things. And when the nodes came back around, we just live our patterns. So we'll always have some semblance, but we hopefully apply more wisdom and have more courage to come at these things differently. And I said, oh my gosh, I think I'm getting ready to take off. And at the same time, then we had this wonderful Uranus and Taurus action happen and became like this massive uprising of the digital nomad. And I am one of them. And it is so brilliant to see how in the mundane astrology of it, as Uranus awakened and hit this Taurus vibration, it literally sent people back to the land of their ancestors, or the land where they felt like the food and the value and the pleasure and the play were there. It's brilliant to watch. And if you have not seen this or really followed when the digital nomad movement really took off, because it was trickling, but then and it was so amazing that so many times people were saying, I just feel like I have to go. And that is very Uranian. And they didn't have any questions about it. That's what I love about Uranus. You're not unsure. You're like, oh no, I have to go now. And that was the case for me and for us. It was very definite that it was time to go.
Did you consult your astrocartography? I mean, I think that's probably a silly question, but did you look at your lines, your family's lines? Like, how did astrology come into play in terms of the place that you chose?
Yes. So it didn't come into play in terms of the place I chose. We chose the place, and there were some series of synchronistic events that actually I was aiming for Germany because that's where my family is from, and I am in Seville, Spain. And that I think was the universe kind of giving my shoulder that nudge, a little course correction to say, actually, here. And it was great because we chose, and then I did my astrocartography with Martha Clark. And it's so funny because the lines that I had in Colorado are the exact lines that I have in Spain, but in two very different containers. In the United States, the country itself holds a very masculine container right now. The vibration is primarily masculine. And as I came into Spain, I had access to the same lines in a very feminine container, and it has completely played out in a very different delivery of who I am. It has softened my husband and helped him heal in some very deep ways. It has given rest to my daughter. It has been a very, very different experience. So in that way, I do laugh that I'm like, no, I probably would have consulted my astrocartography first because I am an astrologer, but this one was a little bit more guided. And I do think that's also very Uranian. Your higher self wakes up and goes, just be quiet. I'm showing you what we're doing.
It's Uranian and it's very feminine. I mean, you really were intuitively, you were reading the signs and the feedback you were getting from the universe, and you were allowing that to guide you. I have another question before we go into the mundane astrology. You said this was a nodal axis kind of pattern. I love how you said we live our patterns. We just hopefully do so with more wisdom and intelligence over time, right? More consciousness. Did you have foresight that when that nodal shift happened to Taurus and Scorpio, that you might have this impetus to move? Or did the nodal shift happen and then you went, whoa, oh yeah, I remember I've always wanted to live in Europe. How did that work?
Yeah, no, I knew. I knew because I think because I'm still heavy in consultation, and I sit with people a lot and we talk about the patterns. So even looking back into my own chart, and I explored with my husband, before we were even talking about the Taurus Scorpio axes coming in, and what were you doing at this time in your life, and what was going on, what was shaping. So we knew something was coming. I didn't know exactly, and that's where I make room for the universe to surprise and delight me, even as an astrologer, So I did know that I was like, well, here are the things that I have done. So these things in my pattern will show up now, and 20 years from now, they'll show up again, and we'll do something similar to it. So yes, we did have some insight. And then when it happened and the clarity kicked, it was really, really neat.
I love it. Ray Merriman was just on the podcast last month. And he said, I think it's a Mark Twain quote, actually, that the patterns don't necessarily repeat exactly the same, but they rhyme. They rhyme. So there's a resonance to them. And I totally butchered that quote. It wasn't exactly like that, but something like that. Yeah. So, and that's what you're describing, like this pattern for you. And speaking of patterns, this comes into global events as well. This comes into countries' charts and the world. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this global astrology, mundane astrology. And let's start with the major players. When you're looking at world events, what are you looking at in terms of which planets? Are you looking at the nodes? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So funny enough, like I love when you're like, mundane is not a very good name for mundane astrology. I love that because it's not very mundane, in our traditional sense, but it actually comes from the Latin name mundus, which means the world. So we know that, first of all, that this was the original type of astrology because people were not wondering so much about, will I have a baby? Will I have these things? These are always human concerns, but they wanted to know, will we have an earthquake? Are we going to die? Is the sun going to crash into the earth? These were the questions. So it's kind of neat to see that way before we have what we have, this was the original kind. It wasn't natal, So that's something to kind of keep in mind that we've been using this for a very long time. So some of the biggest key players are, first of all, the sun. Will the sun rise and set? Will the king, will the queen rise or set? This is important information, right? When you're thinking about how will we govern a country, or how will we know which events we are looking at to navigate? What are we doing here is essentially the question. So the sun plays an absolutely huge significance in what we're doing in mundane astrology, but also the moon, because then the moon is going to tell us the governance of the people. What are the state and the condition of the people, the general populace, the general opinion? How is daily life going? What's the climate of the masses? These kinds of things. And it's interesting, as I'm even talking about it, and I think this has been in my awareness as over this last 2 years as I've been practicing, that I don't think that there are any minor players in mundane astrology. They just work differently. The outer planets in mundane astrology bring the significance of holding a longer container of what that world or what the globe or the country will work on. And the inner planets just show us more short term what we're going to experience more quickly and more intensely. So that said, we do want to be paying attention to where is Saturn, where is Neptune, what's happening with Pluto and Uranus, as they're going to set the stage for what planets or what countries are going to work on for a longer period of time.
And are there particular cyclical transits that we're looking at in terms of those outer planets? And then also, sorry, real quick, I know that we've as humanity discovered some other outer planets that weren't a part of the conversation when mundane astrology would have started. So how does that come into maybe your interpretation or what you see astrologers doing in general?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, we were not living our best lives with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. This just wasn't the business, So now we have those in our space for consideration. And the way that I play with it, and I see other people using it and bringing it into their practices, we have access. It's like advancement. You get to have a baby with a little bit of, be cool medicine now. And thank God for advancements. So it's things like that. So when we're using it and we're bringing the new knowledge, first of all, we acknowledge that in mundane astrology, when those outer planets were discovered, that our consciousness was ready as a collective to embody what those planets needed to show us and usher in for us. So anytime we see some kind of new discovery, God knows what else we're going to discover, but it brings in the next layer of consciousness and how we're going to work with it. Now, anytime that the outer planets are having a joining or a conversation with one another, we're going to pay a lot of attention to those cycles, because they are telling us that we have got a very big global change of mind and change of direction that the energies are going to be going. We're going to see that when we get into 2025, we will see Saturn and Neptune dance with one another. This is important. This is a big deal. This is a new mind frame of structure that will be going on in the world that we haven't really seen and participated in before. As well, there will be new ideals and a whole new vision held for the world itself that we will continue to move towards. How we govern will be absolutely different as well. So we do watch for these outer planets to be dancing with one another, to see what they're going to be kicking back in terms of these longer term lessons.
I remember in 2020, the astrologers kept saying, you included, there's a huge astrological event happening in 2020, and it will be global. It's not specific to a country or a region of the planet. It is absolutely a global event. So what would you be looking at to make that sort of distinction? This is a global shift versus this is a shift for a particular country, for example.
So looking at a global event, as we're saying it here, really again comes back to those outer planets, because they're going to hold a bigger container where nobody is going to be missed by it, right? Every country, every set of people is going to be impacted by it. So when we're looking at that, that's when we have to kind of squish it down into the containers of the different countries. We need to take the Saturn Uranus square. We need to take, Saturn Neptune coming together. We need to take Jupiter and Saturn coming together. We need to take those bodies and drop them then for further interpretation into the country chart, because just seeing it in the global perspective is going to give us the semblance of what will this wave bring into the world. But then how will each individual country respond to that? And those waves will thus, have impact on how the global engagements go. That's where it has to start. So we kind of start with this big wide angle of this will have an impact because of how rare it is when they come together. And then we need to shrink it down. And then we continue to shrink it down and bring it into our personal lives and our homes. So it's really a bit of a funnel.
Okay. And Stormie, how do you technically, how do you actually pull these charts? Because if you're doing birth time for an individual, your birth time, date, location, how to do that. How do you do it for the world? And how do you do it for a country?
Yeah. How do you do it for the world? That is
is there a birth chart for the world? How do you technically pull the charts so you can start to look at these things?
So we don't have a birth chart for the world. That would be
I was being facetious.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, but then what? I still really like it because that would be really great.
Yes.
If anybody has that information, feel free to call Rick Levine. Okay.
Yes.
So, but what we do when we're looking at it for the world, we're just looking at the dance of where they are. But for individual countries or events, we're pulling it just like a normal birth chart. What is the date, the time, and the place that the particular event is going to happen? Now, in terms of countries can have a lot of different birth charts because we're going to look for significant events that cause them to change direction. Was there a constitution that was signed? Was there a war? And not every war gets a new chart or gives the country a new chart. That's not always the case. Sometimes there are multiple constitutions that have been signed within a country. So you're trying to stay as current as you can with whatever the country's doing that is reshaping how it is existing. But you pull it exactly like a birth chart. So this can be a little bit tricky depending on where you are. If anybody's ever seen the charts for Japan or China, they have several charts. Right? There's a lot to be looking at. We don't fully agree on the active chart of the United States. We've got 2 that we've come down to, so that's pretty good. We're in the zip code of solution, but we're looking for bigger events that shape the direction.
And can you do chart rectification techniques just like you would do for a person that you don't know their exact birth time, for example? Can you backtrack based on big events for that country to pinpoint it?
Absolutely. You can definitely do a chart rectification. Now, I think for the mundane rectification, that is a definite specialty, and it is not something that I specialize in, but I do know that there are practitioners who can go back and they really, really enjoy that. I feel like those are our astrologer historians who really like getting in there. But also it's nice because oftentimes countries do keep good record. So you have some space to go back and say, oh, they claimed independence here. Oh, a constitution was signed here. Oh, an annex happened here. And you can kind of look at those different dates. So that would be very helpful.
If someone was, so when we first started talking, we talked about the importance of the sun, the importance of the moon, and then the outer planets, but you also said there's really no insignificant players. So if someone wanted to start though, is there a good starting point? Always look at Saturn and Jupiter, or, always look at what Pluto, is there any sort of starting point that could help someone sort of hone in this huge breadth of information to start to notice the patterns?
Yeah. In my particular practice with mundane, I always say start with what we know we can see. Start with the sun, start with the moon, because if you can understand the people and you can understand the rulership that it is currently under with the sun, who's in charge, this is going to give you a lot of information immediately about
what the sun changes so much. How do you do it? What are you looking at?
Yeah, you're looking at the time with the country was born, let's say we're looking at a country, you're going to be looking at the sun to see, first of all, what is that country's natural rulership, right? What are they looking for? What were they born under? What kind of dictatorship or monarchy were they looking for? Because that kind of leadership, that kind of governor, that head of state is going to indicate the overall direction that this country is trying to go. So we also have to remember that, yes, the sun changes all of the time, but when the chart was cast, it's got a particular sun, it's got a particular moon placement. So what was happening in the chart at that time? And then we weigh that against the transits when we get there. So what's the current sun transit doing? Are there any aspects from the outer planet coming to that nation's sun? Because we may be having some big changes in leadership, which could change the entire direction of a country. Right? We could have an outer planet transit to that country's moon, and it could change the entire opinion of its people. So these are, start with what you can see.
Stormie, there's been a lot of talk about the Pluto return, for example, for the United States. So that is basically Pluto coming back to the same position that it was in when which chart though? Because I know there's been some debate about when the Pluto return actually is. What's your read on that?
Yeah, my take is the chart that is the Sagittarius rising. So it's the Independence Day chart. I know some people like the Gemini rising chart. I just don't vibe with it. To me, it doesn't add up. Also, from when I was learning mundane astrology, is the one that I learned on. So I probably have my own bias in the way of that. So I acknowledge that up front. But I believe that the United States has absolutely done its Pluto return.
Is done with the Pluto return, you said, or in it?
In it.
Now. Yes. Yeah. I think I would.
Because we're not done.
Yeah, no, definitely not done. I think that most people would probably agree. Okay. So we have some big world conversations happening for 2025 and 2026. Yeah. What planetary aspects and transits are these based upon? You already alluded to it a little bit, but let's talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, looking from the outer space, we've got Pluto moving into Aquarius, but it's not that Pluto is moving into Aquarius because we've had some flirting and some dancing with that, but it's that in 2025, we are done with Capricorn. So we will we move to the new world. We've had years to prepare to get into the new world. The digital revolution has come upon us. This is how we will live now, right? So that's a big deal because we're not sneaking back in the back door into comfort that we used to have, right? As a globe, that's it. We're done. We're going forward. And that is going to be a big deal in a mundane way, which will trickle down into everyone's household. Because one of the first things that will trigger is out in the world, the changes in the power struggles, that what's going on in Aquarius. Of course, it's going to be about the advancement and how we're advancing with these things. But it's also going to trickle into everybody's personal lives because there has to be transformation and the power struggle to get on board with transformation to fit that societal change that's coming in. So that is going to be huge. That, I think, will be such a major factor in the world because when we're looking at mundane, we can't look at it without how the personal is going to struggle to do the changes that need to happen, right? That's how we shape the worlds that we're in. So, and Pluto can bring up our darker forces, our deeper fears, I'm scrapping for control to keep things as they were. So we will continue to see that, and that's going to be huge. But then, of course, we've got Neptune moving into Aries, and this is a big deal. Neptune's been fine in Pisces, living its best life, being very, very comfortable. And as Neptune pushes to Aries in 2025, this is a significant shift. We're not in for the super long shift into Pisces, but we're again going to start to flirt with the potentials that are there and start as a globe redefining identity, redefining individuality, fighting forward for a new idea. Lots of innovation. Aries is a beginning energy. So we're going to innovate. And one of the things we're going to see is new spirituality, new ideas. Right? New ideas about what is spiritually acceptable in particular places, what philosophies now govern us. Those are big deals when we're talking about how do you navigate in day-to-day life. I also think that Neptune in Aries, because of the kind of spiritual awakening that comes to the table for us, is going to, from a spiritual perspective, revolutionize our belief structure about leadership style and about what we find acceptable. And there's going to be this call for the leader that is without reproach, the leader that doesn't have some terrible backstory, right? We're going to see a lot more of that kicking up as we go. And right behind that, we're going to see that Saturn's going to also move into Aries and begin to shape and refine. And that's an interesting dance because Saturn wants to create the structure, Neptune wants to dissolve it. And now we're talking about doing that in countries. We're trying to dissolve an authority, dissolve an ideal, but then we're also going to try and create some structure around that. So there's issues that are going to be related to that, but they are all about creating the new structure and taking responsibility for the identity that the world and its individual countries will own moving forward. So these are huge. Aries is where we start.
So are those the three biggest ones? Because we also have Uranus, right? Uranus moving into Gemini.
Uranus is going to move into Gemini. Yeah, we're not done. Like, oh my gosh, it just keeps going as Uranus gets into Gemini and we see this absolute explosion. We think we're seeing AI now. We think we're seeing these innovations in medical and science and even in mathematics. We are not. The explosion of what we've learned, where Uranus brought things up from under the earth, skills, gifts, resources we didn't know that we had access to, traumas even in the world, right? Now, as Uranus comes into Gemini, we're going to see the advancements we can use to reset and to shape a future for ourselves. It's going to be wild. I absolutely can't wait to see it. And it reflects, I think, the spirit also of wanting to reform, not everybody going against it, everybody going, yes, hear my voice. I want something different. I want progress, even if I don't agree with what necessarily it is.
Stormie, how do you see what I love observing about you and the different astrologers that I've had on the platform talking about these changes? You all talk about them with a lot of enthusiasm and like a sense of adventure and like kind of like, ooh, like what's next? I love asking about your personal perspective around it because I think that it helps other people who may feel like they have to brace for some of these changes, or maybe they're hearing about ways that it could go really dark or like really dystopian or really like not ideal. Change isn't always, my dad always used to say, this is not the best saying, but it's stuck with me. The devil you know is sometimes better than the devil you don't know. And so I know that there's a lot of people feeling like that, like, ooh, like digital AI revolution, like that doesn't sound exciting to me. I'd rather us be going back to nature and going back to the earth. So how do you see it and how do you hold it?
Thank you for asking that, because that's something that's really important to me in the work in general right now. And the way that I see it is, first of all, we came into a human experience, and the human experience involves struggle. It does. And, when you learn how to struggle, you struggle better. So there's, first of all, the internal personal battle of, am I grounded enough to bend, not break as I'm on my journey? And I think that's something that we're all working towards and with. Some people are very limber, but they are not emotionally strong. So they're learning to bend in that way. So I think that it comes down to the roots first, right? Where are you and what do you have that grounds you and helps you do the journey? Because to be in the human experience and suffering under the weight of a mind that can tell you a lot of things, that's not something I want for any of us, but it is the journey that we're on to learn some mastery over that. So starting from the root there, I think, is where I look at all astrology. The other place I go is I start to get a little bit wider. Now I'm taking the funnel down and up and out, but you're incarnated now. You're here. I'm an evolutionary and a humanistic astrologer. I don't think anybody gets in or out before their time. You're here because your vibration matches the vibration that is here, which means you have something to do. If you weren't needed anymore, your vibration would not stay, right? And we see that all of the time as planets change signs and bring in new vibration, the things that are not vibrationally aligned go. And that is what it is. They shift or they go. And that has always been. That has always been. So you're here, you have a purpose. So know that, first of all. And the purpose is not just to get batted around by the universe, but humanity is built with some struggle. So how do you struggle better? Taking it beyond that, I always like to bring people back to our past in the world. Humans are adaptable. I mean, really, I don't know any aliens that I know of, but of the species, we kind of are like cockroaches a little bit, like we're really indestructible. When you go back through our history, we have survived a lot, everybody. We have, and we do it together. However that looks, we do it together, So I try to take people back there. And at this particular time, a big thing I've been talking about is people worrying with AI and it's going to take us down and all of these things. Two things. First of all, go back to the Industrial Revolution. Think about it. Drop yourself into that time because we're in similar configurations, especially with Uranus and Taurus. They thought that that was the end of days then. And what happened is the machines came in and it changed things significantly. And today the machines have been everyday part of our lives. I sure like my cell phone. I sure like my washer dryer. You know what I mean? These things. So we survived and we made it and we found a way to steward the machines in the new world. We will find a way with what's coming in next as well. And the other thing, and this has stuck with me forever, I went to a lecture with my husband and the man who was speaking. He said, you know how every generation says that the next generation, the younger one, is going to like kill us all off. And he said, the very first person to say that was Socrates. And here we are. And I thought, wow, we're doing all right.
You mean every generation thinks that the next generation is like the end of humanity? Absolutely. Okay. And so Socrates said that first?
Yeah. At least he's the one that wrote it down first. And I think we're going to change, and change is fine. It's the transition that we get bumped around a little bit. So really making sure that while we're going through the hallway, getting to change, you have some of your own grounding. That's really important. That's how we survive.
You know what I think is even harder than the change or like the getting bumped around part is the dread. The dread about the thought of the change and what it might bring. And I see a lot of that right now. Like there's just kind of this like, oh no, and that I think it's like you said, all of these things, it's just an opportunity to work with these aspects of ourselves that are coming up. And with Pluto going into Aquarius, of course, Pluto's pulling up these deep-seated fears. And when you brought up the Industrial Revolution, I think about that all the time. Like if I was in that moment, what fear I could have about the future of the world. And in some ways, those fears were founded. We are more disconnected from nature. We are more disconnected, maybe even from our higher guidance and our, these things. We are really busy and running around all the time. Like all those things that probably sitting at the brink of that moment, we were concerned about. But there's also the parts that we probably couldn't see then. Like I'm having this conversation with you, Stormie. I'm on Maui. You are in Spain and we are connected, and we're connected with these people from all over the world, all of our listeners, all of the viewers right now, who we've been able to come together in our love of the sky, of the planets and the stars. Like we've been able to find each other and have these conversations in a way that is global, and that's amazing. And we probably couldn't see those kinds of gifts then. So whenever I go into any sort of fear around AI, I mean, AI is an easy one because, I also think about all the movies that we were shown about AI long before AI, like I even knew what AI was. Like I've gone back and looked at Terminator, like it's terrifying. Who the heck wants that? It's absolutely terrifying. And I don't think there was ever any media shown to us where AI ended up being a good thing. It always like turned on us and destroyed the world and made it this super gray, ugly, horrible place to be. So we have to be aware of that too. How have we already been programmed to brace
Mhm.
against this thing, to
Absolutely.
dread it, and
Yeah,
think that it could ruin us? And where is that founded, and where is that kind of just programming? And how do we create with it? How do we bring our own intention and consciousness and vision and awareness into what's happening?
absolutely. I mean, besides the Jetsons, I was
Oh,
prepared to be in my floaty car. I'm not gonna lie. Like I
that's
was
true. The Jetsons, it was cool in the Jetsons.
it was.
That's right.
Elroy
Yeah.
was a cool kid. But yeah, and I just love that you brought up Pluto and Aquarius because I think we've needed to have a dance with that because it really does bring up these really big fears about how collectively we've been shaped.
Yeah.
But then in Aquarius, Aquarius is the two lines, but they're not separate from each other in that glyph. It is the individual and the collective. So it is, what do I bring here? And looking at how we've been shaped to all be similar in some way or have a similar mind frame, but being pushed to go, what do I offer? What do I do with my finances? What food do I eat? That's very Aries, and that's where we're going. And that, you're right, that can be a lot that is coming up, but I love that we are connected to people in other countries and they say, yeah, you don't have to do that, right? They show us another way of living, another way of being that is not within our American, Australian programming, whatever. So there's a lot that comes with it for sure. But we have some choice. We have some
Thank
choice.
you. We have some choice. Thank you so much for your perspective, Stormy. Spain looks really good on you. It looks good on you. It sounds good on you. It feels good on you. I mean, talk about change. Like we all know whenever we move geographically or even travel, there's this expansion of awareness of ourselves. You have to like reorient to who you are. And it's very exciting. So I guess we can all consider that we're doing a major change of address in the coming years. In that there is always challenge. There's always like the disorientation and that period of breaking down, the layers of that we thought we were. And there's also the embracing of who we're becoming in the process. And it sounds to me like we're collectively going to be going through that together over the next couple of years. And not like we haven't been going through it, but it's going to be accelerated on some level.
Yeah, we're making the next pages of the history book right now. When you get to that chapter in school and they've got the big old industrial revolution picture on chapter 30,000, we're going to be the next chapter where you see all the little AI people, and we're doing that. And that is not only big and massive and special because we're doing it with every soulmate here that we need. The cast of characters has been perfectly assembled.
You're making me cry, Stormy.
I know, me
Thank
too,
you.
actually. I was like, whoa.
Wow, that is just beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, everyone. So, Stormy, you're beautiful and amazing. Thank you so much for giving us this intro on the mundane astrology, and thank you for redefining it for me. It's either the word mundane needs a redefining, or we from the very beginning, whenever people would talk about mundane astrology, I was like, you mean some like boring astrology, like astrology that like isn't very interesting, is very anyways, that's my own thing. Thank you for helping to reframe it, for helping us get this orientation. For any of you who are like, I want to go deeper, Stormy does have a mastery class with us that she taught for our inner circle members a couple years ago, where you can start to learn how to interpret this yourself. And we are releasing it from the vault. We love to think of it as like a masterclass vault. We are releasing it to the public. It's never been made available to the public. It was only available for inner circle members. And we're releasing that today. So any of you that want to partake in that, it is now available, and you get a 22% discount, which is great. That's in celebration of the release of this mastery class, only through Wednesday of next week though. So I'm not quite sure what that date is, but it's a short little promotion to celebrate releasing it from the vault. If you're interested in partaking in Stormie's mastery class on mundane astrology, you can go to astrologyhub.com/mundane. There's that word again. And then to get the discount, just enter in discount code world. So enter in the discount code WORLD and you'll get your 22% off. If you are an Inner Circle member, you do get to stack your discounts. So our Grow members, you get to add 10% on top of that. And our Expand members, you get to add 20% on top of that. So that is available to you now. If you were an Inner Circle member, if you weren't a member when Stormie taught, if you are a member, it's already in your online library. So don't worry about that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that class, what they're going to learn? Why you chose the certain angle of it that you did?
Absolutely. So it is an introduction to mundane astrology class. And I specifically chose to teach it and come from the angle of no matter what kind of astrology you've been trained in or your perspective is, this class is so basic and we'll get those concepts and the different ways that we talk about the planets and the houses. It'll get you orientated to it in a really solid foundational way. For me, I'm all about strong foundations and letting the simple and the practical guide you. And from there, if you want to add in fixed stars and anything else that you like and do that astro gymnastics, you'll have a solid foundation here too, because you do have to think differently. The planets don't mean the same thing in a mundane chart. So you need to be able to say it. You got to be able to be astrologically fluent if you're whatever kind of astrology you're practicing. So in this class, that's what you get. We go over those planets, we go over the houses, we go over how we look at the different angles of how they work together in a foundational way.
But specifically mundane. So there's nuances. If you've learned natal charts, this is going to be a different kind of perspective for you on those planets and houses and
absolutely.
Amazing. Okay. All right. Well, Stormie, it's been so fun to connect with you. I'm so happy that you're flourishing and you're doing so well in Spain and that you're still practicing astrology, which we want you to do for a long, 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 long time. So thank you for that. Very excited that we get to be together again in the Inner Circle in 2025. Anything you want to leave us with as just some closing thoughts?
Just that the universe is really very kind and it's very loving. Everything that we are going through, you don't have to do it alone. There's just personal work to do, but you don't have to do it alone. And that the universe really is very kind and loving. So turn your face to it and ask for the help that you need so that you can progress forward, suffer better. Suffer better, as the Buddhists say.
Thank you so much, Stormie. This has been such a pleasure. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you for being a part of our global community. I'm so happy that we are soulmates on this path, as Stormie said, and that we get to experience the future together, that we get to suffer better, as Stormie says, together and learn from each other and learn from each other's perspectives. And how are you doing it? And how do you deal with this? And I'm afraid of this. How do you see it? I think that this helps us so much to really just see that it's not totally personal. We have a lot of collective fears, and B, we also have the medicine and the remedies for each other to move beyond those. So thank you for being here, for being a part of this conversation, for being curious. And we couldn't do what we do without you. Take care, everybody. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode. We're also dropping those links in the show notes. So look for the show notes for any of the links that we talked about here today. All right. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.